Welcome to the deep dive.
Hey there.
Today we have, just a monumental stack of material to get through.
It's huge, a really incredible set of sources.
We're talking history, technology, sheer imaginative world building, and our job is to filter it all down. This one was actually requested by a listener.
Yeah, a great request. It's all about these narratives of great power, hidden societies, and I think most importantly, the moral weight of creation.
And when you say creation, we should be really clear. We are not speaking metaphorically here. Not about, political structures or economics.
No, not at all. This is about the literal, it's a near magical ability to write entire worlds, they call them ages, into existence using something called the art.
Which is just a fascinating concept on its own.
Yeah.
So our mission today is pretty complex.
It is. We want to trace the journey of this central figure, a man named Atrus. We're going from his childhood, which was spent in total isolation and scarcity, all the way to him becoming a master of this art. And then, I think this is the core of it, we need to explore how the hubris and the flaws in that power led to catastrophe.
Not just once, but twice.
Exactly. It's a story about the failure of even the most sophisticated societies when their morality just isn't there.
We're going to uncover how the spectacular fall of this ancient underground empire, the Domain.
An empire that once ruled 1,000,000 worlds, supposedly.
1,000,000 worlds. And how its fall was just tragically mirrored by the collapse of this other society, the Terranae. And through all this, we have to figure out what Atrus's final responsibility became.
The sources really push this question of moral accountability. What do you do when you are literally responsible for the physical existence of millions of people?
So how does a grandmother's pragmatic survival skills, a friend's influence, a father's incredible technological arrogance, and this deeply hidden truth about institutionalized slavery, how does all that combine to determine the fate of millions across multiple realities?
It seems like there's a common fatal flaw that links both of these massive civilizations. Okay, let's get into it.
Let's unpack this. So to really understand Atrus, the man he became, this master age writer who ends up holding the fate of civilizations in his hands, we have to start right at the beginning.
You have to.
In the cleft, which the sources describe as a harsh, unforgiving hole in the ground.
And he's raised there by his grandmother, Anna, or by her DNA name, Tiana. This isolation, I think, is the essential crucible for everything that follows.
The cleft was a place of just extreme scarcity.
Very little grew there. It was this tight, confined volcanic fissure. And the sources make a really interesting point. Anna sustained them not by farming, but by trading her art.
She was a painter and a sculptor.
A very skilled one. And that's how they survived. She'd trade these beautiful, intricate little pieces for the absolute necessities. Salt, fuel, flour,
There's a real irony there, isn't there?
Sure.
A very active creation. Her art is what allows for their physical survival. The tangible beauty of what she made was their currency.
And that reliance on the tangible, on observation, it profoundly shaped Atrus's education.
Which was all about science and nature.
Entirely. Anna instilled in him this focus on absolute precision. There's this wonderful snapshot of him as a young boy just studying the physics of sand dunes.
Right, he wasn't just looking at them.
No, he was trying to understand the causal necessity. Why is the windward side smooth and firm, but the leeward side just tumbles down? It's all about the balance of grains.
That deep scientific curiosity. The idea that every physical structure is governed by a natural law. It stands in such stark contrast to how the Daedalus later used their art.
Oh, completely. They used it more like wish fulfillment, whereas for Atrus, it started as pure science. Anna encouraged him, as the sources say, to see, to observe, and question the world around him.
And you really feel the harshness of that life in the small details the sources give us, like the excitement for his 7th birthday.
The cakes Anna painstakingly made, the gift of the kitten, Flame. It's this tiny moment of pure, simple joy in an otherwise unforgiving world.
Or that description of Anna when a rare rainstorm finally comes.
Oh, that's beautiful. She giggles like a young girl and just puts her face up to the downpour in ecstasy.
It really highlights how much they valued things the Domini would have just, engineered into existence, or just taken for granted completely.
Absolutely. But the lessons of the cleft were also brutal. They came with immediate, often tragic gravity.
You're talking about the kitten.
Yeah, Flame. Poisoned by improperly rinsed wild shoots. It's such a small error, a momentary lack of precision.
But the consequences were absolute.
And this tragedy, more than any lecture, is what the sources say marked Atrus's movement out into the adult world.
Anna understood that. She watched him carry the tiny body to a patch of blue flowers, and she knew he'd shed something of his childishness.
He learned the stakes. He realized their environment was unyielding. Every action required precision because failure could mean waiting a year for supplies from traders, or in this case, it meant death.
And that lesson, that need for precision and responsibility, it gets immediately underscored by his first engineering project.
Yeah, this is incredible. At age 10, under Anna's supervision, he engineers a crude but functional volcano cap and winch system.
This wasn't a toy. This was life support.
Exactly. If that project failed, they would have had to wait a year, maybe more, for replacement parts from the traders who passed by. The sources note the thrill of excitement he felt when it actually worked.
It reinforces that core concept, doesn't it? Precision and successful creation are inextricably linked to survival itself.
And that success, that first time he really built something that worked against the odds, it sort of laid the groundwork for the great secret Anna had been keeping from him.
She'd been teaching him about this civilization, the Diani, from the books on her shelf, but he wasn't always sure they were real.
He sometimes wondered if she had just invented them herself, the way she created her paintings. A beautiful but maybe fragile fiction.
Until he saw it.
Until he saw it. At age 10. An irregularity on the wall, and in the shadows, this massive carved word. Half his height, twice his breadth.
They
And that just confirmed everything. The overwhelming reality of this civilization Anna had spoken of. He wasn't just living in a personal myth anymore.
And just as this knowledge confirms this vast hidden past, his father, Gehn, arrives.
After 14 years of absence, shattering the piece of the cleft and basically delivering Atrus straight into that history.
The arrival is just shocking in its arrogance.
It's so cold. He doesn't greet his son. He immediately judges his environment. When Anna asks where he's been, he just dismisses the cleft as nowhere. That is where. A hole in the ground. That's all this is.
He completely discounts the entire foundation of survival and morality that Anna had spent a decade building for his son.
And this sets up the central philosophical conflict of the entire story, right? The conflict over the art.
Anna knew Gehn's teachings would be compelling, so she gives Atrus this critical intellectual tool first.
She warns him. She tells him to weigh everything Gehn teaches him against her unchangeable truths, the ones rooted in science and nature.
And her key lesson was about language itself, which is the foundation of Deni writing.
It's a brilliant move on her part. She explains that words aren't just simple labels like rock or sand. They also represent these complex, layered concepts like love or intelligence or loyalty.
To really grasp them, you need layers of precise definitions.
Exactly. Her example is loyalty. Is it the blind loyalty of a soldier or the stubborn loyalty of a wife? They're different, and that precision matters.
This intellectual groundwork is crucial, because Deni writing demands that precise, layered understanding of cause and effect, of causal necessity.
To write a structure, you have to understand all of its corollary definitions, everything connected to it.
Meanwhile, Gehn shows up with a complete rejection of humility. He's proud. He claims he spent 14 years studying Deni culture and that none of it was lost.
His entire return is fueled by this destructive vision of Duni superiority, and he just takes Atrus away to begin his apprenticeship in the art, completely convinced he can restore the entire empire single-handedly.
So the cleft taught Atrus that every grain of sand matters.
And Gehn was about to teach him that no grain of sand matters, only the will of the writer.
That is a perfect transition. The isolation of the cleft taught Atrus humility, precision. So now let's pivot to the history. Gehn was so desperate to resurrect the Dini Empire and see how that civilization's arrogance led to its own collapse.
Right, because the ultimate disaster wasn't purely a technical failure. It was political. It was rooted in Duni's inability to cope with an outside presence.
Specifically Anna, or Tiana.
Exactly. She was discovered by the Surveyors, which was the Dini guild responsible for mapping New Ages. And it turns out that Atrus's grandfather, Gehn's father, a man named Atrus, was a master surveyor.
And Atrus's decision to bring Anna, a surface dweller, into the underground city of Diani caused a massive political upheaval.
Oh, huge. Among the guilds, among the 5 lords who governed the society, she represented an uncontrolled variable, a natural element that threatened the structured, rigid perfection of their written civilization.
Atrus was caught in the middle, loyalty to Dani law, affection for Anna. He eventually married her. But the sources point to one primary opponent.
Viovis, a young, very influential writer. He was the son of Lord Rickeri, one of the 5 lords, and Viovis feared Anna's natural cunning. He saw her as an existential threat to Dany purity.
And it's this schism, this political fight, that leads directly to the final catastrophe.
It does, and in the sources, Gehn, in his bitterness, actively blames Anna for it all.
He shifts the blame completely.
He claims that after Viovis's initial revolt failed, it was Anna who spoke eloquently to the Great Council against executing him. So, in Gann's mind, her compassion is what allowed Viovis to live and later plot the final destruction.
The irony is just crushing. The very compassion and moral sense that Anna possessed and that Atrus inherited is what Gehn views as the fatal weakness that destroyed his civilization.
But the reality of the betrayal was so much darker and so much more institutional. And Atrus, Anna's husband, a loyal gaming master, he's the one who suffers the most.
The sources give us the gruesome details of Viovis's final retribution. He carries it out with an ally, Agarus.
Viovis had been stripped of his title, incarcerated on a prison rock. He's filled with bitterness, and he uses his deep knowledge of Duni infrastructure.
Specifically, their citywide air circulatory system.
Yes, and surveyor's equipment. He pumps a highly specific poisonous gas into the entire city.
And this detail is critical.
Yeah.
The gas was only harmless to people with Duni physiology.
It's a crucial detail. It was essentially a bacteria that the Duni were immune to, having been exposed to it over millennia. But it was absolutely lethal to anyone else.
Like Anna?
Like Anna, or the very few other non-Dini in the city. The gas killed thousands. The great work of millennia was undone in a single day.
And Atrus himself, Genn's father, he barely survives the initial waves. He uses his last bit of strength to link to another age, Gimmadid, just as his air runs out.
Anna later senses his passing. The destruction was just catastrophic. And it was all brought about by internal bitterness and political toxicity.
And the art itself was the weapon. The knowledge of the systems was the weapon.
Which leads us directly into Atrus's apprenticeship and the central technological concept we have to understand, the science of age writing.
Atrus was taught that Duni writing is a science of precise description. It demands absolute adherence to the characters they developed over tens of thousands of years.
And we have to pause here because this is the technical heart of the whole thing. The reason the precision matters so much is that the Dini didn't just write, "There is a green tree."
No, that's not how it works.
They wrote the complex, interconnected physical laws that allow a green tree to exist, from its cellular structure all the way up to the atmospheric conditions required for photosynthesis.
It all works on a principle of causal necessity and non-contradiction.
Exactly. If you write a planet, you have to account for its geology, its mass, its orbit, its chemical composition, everything. It's this vast causal web. The daily characters were shortcuts that instantly encoded all those necessary corollary details.
But Gehn, of course, immediately violates this foundational principle.
Immediately. He relies on the hubris of his own talent rather than the rigor of the science. Atrus watches him editing ancient deity texts, copying phrases, but deliberately leaving out words he considers useless.
He's shortcutting reality.
He thinks he's smarter than tens of thousands of years of scientific development. And Atrus learns firsthand why Genn's ages were all failing. They weren't big, obvious failures. They were small contradictions that amplified exponentially.
Let's use that fantastic technical example from the sources. Gehn might write something like, "He made the ocean warm."
Right, sounds simple enough. A simple adjective.
But because he failed to write the necessary consequences, like adjusting the planet's axis, or ensuring the geological stability of the ocean floor, or changing the atmospheric pressure needed to maintain that heat, the entire age starts to destabilize.
That small omission creates a fundamental structural contradiction in reality itself.
The sources say his ages failed because they were built piecemeal.
They weren't a whole, fully realized reality, just a collection of parts he liked. And this led to these complex, interconnected faults that you couldn't just patch. The whole fabric of the world was tearing.
And this brings us to Riven, age 5, Genn's least successful experiment.
The ultimate demonstration of his flawed approach. Riven was literally crumbling, geographically unstable. The islanders were suffering from the age's slow deterioration.
And Atrus felt responsible. He recognized that his father's arrogance had written suffering into the very structure of this world. Riven becomes the stage for his own rebellion.
And for the rise of his partner, Catherine, who was, ironically, Genn's most fluent and talented acolyte.
Catherine had this intuitive genius for the art, but she was trapped by Genn's control, his plan for a forced marriage. So, in this stunning display of strategic brilliance, She allies herself with Anna.
Who was hiding out after the Gehn collapse, back on the surface. Catherine steals a blank linking book.
And they pool their knowledge. Anna's hard-won experience from the cleft, that focus on integrity, and Catherine's innate understanding of the art's science.
And together, they write a new temporary age Myst. And it's intentionally based on structural integrity and safety. It's a true haven. They move all the vital Gehn equipment there.
The final confrontation happens back on Riven, the unstable age.
And Catherine forces Gehn to release Atrus by demonstrating her absolute willingness to destroy his flawed creations. She holds one of his linking books over a fissure, a crack in the world that his own bad writing created.
She drops it in.
She drops it, proving she'll do it again. It confirms her resolve and effectively imprisons Gehn on Riven. She even engineers the cataclysmic events to later reverse themselves, making Riven stable again as his permanent, inescapable prison.
It's a shocking display of calculated genius.
It is. Catherine shows the true power of the art, not just to create, but to enforce consequences. And Atrus, now free, is left carrying the weight of Doni's past, his father's failures, and he's facing this colossal task of trying to forge a moral future from the ruins of a civilization.
The aftermath of the Duni fall was, just devastating. Atrus' grandfather, Atrus, was gone. The great underground city lay in ruins, and Atrus is left with the responsibility for a civilization that imploded.
Right, it collapsed spectacularly because of its own moral and structural failings, and Atrus feels compelled by duty. Years later, he returns to the ruins.
He sets up a headquarters in the Inkmaker's Guildhouse, which was relatively undamaged.
And his task is described as slow, laborious, gathering books, cataloging them, trying to make sense of the chaos, and critically, searching for any survivors.
He needed to know if any part of Duni culture could actually be salvaged.
And he wasn't working alone, which I think says a lot about his leadership at this point. He's joined by a new team: Merim, Oma, Isil, Taman, Iris, Karad.
And the work was incredibly dangerous.
So dangerous. After one of them dies exploring one of Gehn's flawed, collapsing ages, Atrus institutes these incredibly strict safety protocols. He recognizes the immense danger posed by the millions of ages they have to sort through.
But this methodical, moral approach, it eventually brings some hope.
It does. They find the first actual Gehn survivors, Timon, Oma, and Isil, who'd been living in total isolation in various ages.
And what's absolutely fascinating is how that separation from the rigid, pressurized Gehn society had changed them.
They had totally changed them. The sources say they had shed several layers of skin. They were freed from the intense social pressures of the guilds, the cultural arrogance that had poisoned the city.
They were more open. They were ready to build something new because they'd experienced true isolation and self-reliance.
Exactly. And this success, this little bit of hope, it spurs Atrus and his team to investigate a major discovery hinted at in ancient texts: the Age of Tyranny.
A world that was supposedly linked to Gehn. The potential of finding an entire offshoot civilization that survived the collapse was huge.
It was their best hope. So they link to tyranny, and what they find at first appears to be perfection.
A vast, beautiful world, lush fields, gleaming white stone buildings, an elegant, sophisticated society, a perfect functional age, proving the art could be used successfully on a massive scale.
And the culture seemed almost unbelievably moral.
The society is led by a king and governors, like Rojathi, and they value things of the mind. Whittles, mental games, memory tests.
And most strikingly, the city has no guild of maintainers.
The D&E equivalent of a police force.
Right, and Atrus, observing this, his first thought is that it's evidence of extremely high moral standards. Why would you need police if no one commits crimes?
And their history seems so durable, they call D&E Road. So they acknowledge the relationship. They have this unbroken chain of patriarchs, a gallery of ancestors, suggesting a societal continuity that spans centuries.
It's everything he was hoping to find, but that initial awe is just shattered almost immediately.
He stumbles upon the deeply hidden truth. The society's perfection was a deliberate, brutal, and utterly foundational illusion.
And this is where the moral depth of these sources really kicks in.
The elegant mansions, the leisure time enjoyed by the masters, it all relied on a massive underclass of slaves called the Relima.
They're easily identified. Shaven heads, subservient black clothing, they carry out every single menial task required to keep this utopian facade running seamlessly.
And Atrus discovers the architectural truth behind the moral lie.
These vast, crude tunnels beneath the elegant surface where the Relima lived and worked in total squalor and servitude. The entire structure, both physical and social, was a masterpiece of moral hypocrisy.
That lesson from the cleft, that integrity is essential, it's thrown into such sharp relief. Tyranny had the structural integrity of the age itself, but its social structure was fundamentally deeply unsound.
And he encounters a tyranny master, a man named Idra, who secretly helps him understand the true depths of this lie.
And this is where the mistakes of Dini come full circle in the most devastating way possible.
Idra reveals that the stomach bacteria that had ravaged Dini, the one that was harmless to Doni but lethal to others, was now afflicting both the tyranny masters and the Relima.
Atrus's act of linking to their world. He accidentally introduced a plague.
He brought Dani's poison into a morally corrupted age, and this leads to Atrus's deepest moral reckoning.
He's crushed by it. He believes his choice to breach the seal and open tyranny was fundamentally wrong. He says, now millions must suffer. The guilt is immense.
It's the ultimate ethical dilemma, isn't it? He intended to find hope and survivors, but instead he delivered death to both the oppressors and the oppressed.
Catherine provides the pragmatic counterpoint. She argues his choice was based on reasonable grounds. He was seeking survivors, not intending to cause harm.
But Atrus can't escape the weight of it. He feels like he was the agent of collapse.
And this crisis of conscience is immediately overshadowed by what's happening on the ground.
Right. The majority of the Relima, they survive the initial shock of the sickness, and they realize their masters are vulnerable for the first time.
So they rise up, led by this bitter, deeply scarred man named Ymir, and they begin fighting the Parley, the tyranny military.
Atrus realizes he hasn't just found a civilization, he has detonated a social revolution. And his role instantly shifts from researcher to war advisor, caught between a dying, corrupt masterclass and a violent, righteous uprising.
So the uprising just instantly forces Atrus into action. He feels ethically bound to the Relima, right?
Yeah.
He was the agent, however accidental, that weakened their oppressors.
He was, but the challenge was immense. How do you advise a revolution and ensure it doesn't immediately fall into the same traps of arrogance and cruelty that destroyed Jimmy and Tyranny?
He makes a wise move. He doesn't take overall leadership himself.
No. He agrees to advise Gat, who was the original Relima elder. He leverages his Demi technological knowledge to aid their cause. Ymir, the leader of the actual fighting, was a much more volatile figure.
And Ymir's demanding direct assistance. So Atrus has to navigate this political tension between the elder and the military leader.
His strategy really shows the application of the scientific precision he learned in the cleft, but he's using it for moral ends now.
He gives them liquid fire, some kind of explosive or incendiary compound.
And he coordinates logistical strategies. He helps them with supply disruptions, creating defensive mazes in the tunnels.
Critically, he stressed that the Relima soldiers had to remain unseen. They needed to avoid direct, pitched battles that they just weren't prepared for.
He's using Dayami tactical knowledge to minimize bloodshed and maximize the effectiveness of this under-resourced rebel force.
But even as he's helping them fight against the old corruption, he starts to see a new corruption taking root.
In Ymir. This is such a crucial element in the sources. Atrus observes Ymir's inherent distrust and his cruelty, particularly his reliance on certain people within the uprising.
The mutes.
Exactly. Ymir relies heavily on mutes to carry out sensitive tasks like delivering messages, and he explicitly says he trusts them more than men with tongues.
That's a devastating insight.
It is. Atrus realizes that Ymir, who was scarred by years of slavery, is immediately replicating institutional prejudice. He's using one group of victims to enforce his will against another.
So Atrus is staring at a fresh cycle of tyranny being born out of righteous anger.
The revolutionary leaders are already displaying the same lack of humility that plagued Gehn and the demi-lords. And recognizing this, Atrus shifts his focus. He moves from the battlefield to societal architecture.
This is arguably the single most important action of his life.
I think it is. He starts working late into the night with Oma and Isel, and he begins framing a new code of behavior for the Relima. He realized that just freeing them wasn't enough.
They had to have a moral structure before chaos or a new Ymir-led tyranny took root.
And his method is rooted in his Demi heritage, precision in writing.
Yeah.
He uses the core Demi legal code, which was based on logic and structural integrity.
But he strips away everything specific to Duni culture, all the guild pressures, all the arrogance.
His goal was explicitly to shape the new society to be fair and healthy. He was legislating for the future, not just reacting to the present. He's using the science of the art not to write a world, but to write a society.
And while Atrus is doing this incredibly practical legislative work, Catherine is exploring the deeper, more philosophical implications of everything that's happening.
She reveals she's been studying ancient Dini prophecies, this complex phraseology that she believes connected time to time, mirroring the intricate process of age writing.
So she's suggesting that many of the events they lived through were, in a sense, pre-written.
Which challenges the idea of free will in their entire universe. If the Dini could truly see the future, if the collapse of Dini and the rise of Atrus were somehow foretold, was his intense moral struggle just theater?
It's a huge question.
And this is where Catherine's synthesis becomes the core philosophical takeaway of the whole saga. She determines that even though Atrus's life was perhaps written, his determination to act on not knowing,
His focus on doing what was right.
exactly. His focus on what was right, like creating law for the Relima, like helping them fight rather than what was merely expedient, is what allowed him to, in a sense, write his own path.
So she's suggesting that the struggle itself, the moral determination, the choice to act honorably when the future seems set, that's what validates the prophecy.
His free way wasn't about changing the destination, it was about defining the nature of the journey. He wrote his own character, which then fulfilled the honorable version of the script.
That brings us to his final mission, the legacy he left behind.
The Relima successfully overthrow their masters. It culminates in the burning of the king's body, stripped of all its finery, and Atrus charges them with one great task: writing their own social structures, learning from the past mistakes of both DC and tyranny.
He gave them the tools for self-governance built on humility and precision.
And crucially, Atrus and Catherine make sure the art itself survives, but without the structural arrogance of the past.
They agree to teach Merim, one of the younger, more enthusiastic assistants, how to write ages.
They chose her specifically because, as the source says, she was starving for knowledge and for strange, exotic places. She represents a new generation, free from Dini's inherent flaws and Ghen's destructive ego.
Their work was far from over, though.
Not at all. Atrus and Catherine link back to Genie. They shift their focus to the colossal work of cataloging and stabilizing the millions of linking books left behind by both civilizations. The search for survivors continued, but now they carried the moral weight of two destroyed societies, armed only with the precision of Anna's cleft lessons and the scientific rigor of Duni's art.
So here's where the convergence of all these themes becomes, I think, really interesting. Atrus's entire life was defined by the synthesis of these two seemingly opposing forces.
It really was.
On one side, you have the meticulous, rigid, absolute science of the Dini art, demanding precision in every single causal detail.
And on the other, you have the fluid, instinctual morality and the raw observational skills that Anna taught him in the scarcity of the cleft.
And that balance was the defining tension of his whole life. We've seen that the Duinani Empire, despite its immense scale, lasted for tens of thousands of years. And it was due to one thing that was later forgotten.
Its foundational restraint and astonishing humility.
Those are the qualities completely forgotten by Gehn. His ego led him to believe he could just edit reality.
And forgotten fundamentally by the tyranny masters, whose perfect society was built on the most violent lack of restraint imaginable, institutionalized slavery.
Both civilizations failed when their structural integrity became divorced from their moral integrity.
Absolutely. Which means Atrus's true legacy, then, it isn't the worlds he wrote. It's the laws he structured for the newly freed Relima.
He was trying to use the precise tools of Gehn, that science of structured creation, to fix the massive moral flaws of two separate civilizations that had been poisoned by pride and inequality. He became a legislator of hope.
He really did.
And it brings us right back to that central haunting idea that Catherine explored, fate versus free will. If the outcome of Atrus's life, the destruction, the revolution, his final choice to write laws, if that was all seen by the ancient Jadmarani, does that diminish the significance of his struggle?
The sources seem to suggest not. They posit that the Dagi were capable of seeing the strands of time, but it was Atrus's moral determination forged in the cleft and tested by his father's arrogance that ensured he walked the most honorable strand available.
So his choices were real, even if the destination was anticipated.
Yes, the choices mattered.
Which raises a really important question for you, the listener, to think about long after this deep dive is complete. If the ancient Dani could truly see the future, as Catherine believed, and if your existence was, in a sense, a pre-written age, Would knowing that paralyze you?
Or, like Atrus, would you strive even harder to ensure that the actions you take, the laws you create for yourself, the morality you uphold, make your predetermined script the most just and honorable path possible?
If your life is a story that's already written, who is the author of your character?